This is Outnumbered Overtime. I'm Harris Faulkner. Fewer than 2 hours from now, President Trump is scheduled to unveil new federal guidelines for reopening the economy. And the stakes, as you know, could not be higher as a plan is rolled out for the next steps in the coronavirus response. The president yesterday suggested some of the areas of the nation could be back in business before May 1st. Here's the president.
The battle continues, but the data suggests that nationwide we have passed the peak on new cases. We'll be opening up states, some states much sooner than others, and we think some of the states can actually open up before the deadline of May 1st. Governors are looking forward, they're chomping at the bit to get going. We'll be the comeback kids, all of us.
However, a growing number of state governors say they are nowhere close to being able to reopen as they team up on a decision. This is New York State has joined Los Angeles, Washington, D.C. in extending their stay-at-home orders until May 15th.
New York pause has worked. The close down has worked. That's how we controlled the beast. That's how we got it down to 0.9. However, we're not there yet. The New York pause policies, the close down policies, will be extended in coordination with other states to May 15th.
We are not yet in a place where we need to be so that we could start reopening.
You need protocols in place that frankly we don't have at the moment, that we will need before we reopen.
I want to bring in Mike Huckabee, former Arkansas governor and a Fox News contributor. Governor, always great to have your perspective and experience on the show, so I will lean heavily on you. What are some of the calculations now that need to be made? And I know that each state is different. As I welcome you to the program, is there an overarching thing that the president would look at?
I think what you just said is the key thing. States aren't the same. Some are densely populated, New York, New Jersey. Those states are maybe needing to be closed longer. But if you're in Wyoming, if you're in Montana, if you're in other parts of rural America, there may not be a reason for you to be holed up at home like a hermit right now. And that decision is best made closer to the people who are being affected by it. And that's why I think the president would be very wise to make this decision leave the decision in the hands of the governors, the mayors, and the people who are closest to their populations. Some have overreacted, Harris. Some have been heavy-handed, and some of it is illogical and irrational. And I think they're going to pay the price for having usurped people's basic liberties. And we can talk about that, but this is a ramping up of the economy again. It won't happen with the flip of a switch. It will happen with sort of an entrance ramp, if you will, to the freeway.
You know, I have a follow-up to that, though. I'm going to point out South Dakota and the governor there. And you say some have been overreacting or heavy-handed. Certainly that's the case. I mean, you see people protesting now. Look at Michigan, where they feel like some of the rules are just arbitrary. But when you look at the popping of the case numbers now and the problems that they're having with COVID-19 in a place like South Dakota that hadn't been a hot spot, that hadn't seen those things, and the governor had taken a different way. The medical professionals, though, have said it can happen any place and that it likely will. So what do you do with that?
It certainly can happen any place, and I think this is where the basic protocols of hand washing, social distancing, not doing the traditional handshake, there's some things that still can be done. But we cannot wait until the very last case of COVID-19 is eradicated before there is some level of economic activity in this country. There won't be a country to come back to. That's the calculated risk, and it's one that has to be taken. That sounds rather audacious, but Harris, I mean, we cannot hole up in our homes for 18 months. The economy won't handle it, and I'm not kidding. There will be nothing to come back to. Small business owners will not have a business. People who work there won't have jobs. And the good old government can't just keep shelling out trillions of dollars indefinitely. There's got to be a point at which we get back to work, we take precautions, and if there does come another hot spot or let's say a significant outburst, then you deal with it, but you deal with it at that place and at that time. You don't make a blanket, one-size-fits-all, 50-state shutdown of the entire country.
I hear you. And, you know, the statistics today, Governor, 13% of the United States workforce sidelined, 22 million people, and you have a lengthening for some of these states to sit by. It's tough. I mean, those people are, I said it last hour, they're not just sidelined, they're suffering. Meanwhile, protesters, I mentioned just a moment ago, held a rally today at the Virginia state capitol demanding that state reopen. Similar protests broke out in other states. We showed you the one yesterday in Michigan live. Thousands of drivers shut down traffic in the Capitol, some of them even getting out of their cars on the sidewalks. Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan is easing her stay-at-home order. At least they want her to. However, the governor says the protests put the public in danger. Watch.
I understand the frustration that people are feeling. I'm frustrated too. None of us wants to be here in this moment, but we are. We know that this rally endangered people. This kind of activity will put more people at risk. And sadly, it could prolong the amount of time we have to be in this posture.
Governor, this country was kind of founded on people who are willing to risk themselves for freedom. Is that what this is or something else?
No, I think it is. Let's be very specific about what people were upset about. For example, this was a heavy-handed approach by the governor of Michigan. She said that you could go to a store that was open, but if there were seeds on the shelf that you could buy and go plant in your garden and grow your own produce, you couldn't purchase the seeds. Now, you could go to the store, you could look at the seeds, but you couldn't touch them and you couldn't purchase them and you couldn't go home and plant them, because she'd rather have you go to a supermarket and touch produce that may have been touched by dozens of people before you, total strangers who may have been infected with the virus, than to go and plant your own garden. Now, people aren't stupid. And I think a lot of Americans are saying, look, I get the whole idea of protection and not having a Major League Baseball game and, you know, even not having big congregated events. But telling me I can't plant a garden, but I can go to the store where they sell the seeds, it's that kind of lunacy that people are just disgusted with. And I think if Howard Beale were alive today from the old movie Network, 1979, it's like we're mad as hell and we're not going to take it anymore.
What drives that? I mean, you've been a governor. You know what it's like to have a crisis at hand. What drives that sort of arbitrary stamp down that we saw, particularly in that state, and obviously Virginia, they think they're feeling it too?
I think a lot of it is the stubbornness on the part of some elected leaders who want to make sure everybody understands they're in charge. The best form of leadership is servant leadership. It's where you understand that the people don't work for you. You work for them. You act in their best interest. You don't try to exercise your power. You try to do everything possible to give them the power to live their lives. When government officials forget who they work for, and they somehow believe that they are lord bosses over the citizens, rather than that the citizens give them a job temporarily so that they can serve those citizens, I think that's a recipe for disaster, and I think we're seeing it in cities and states across the country. And it leads to rebellion. That's what led to the forming of this country. People had enough of being told what they could do, and they said, that's it, no more.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. It's kind of original nature for our nation. And I said arbitrary. I'm sure the governor of Michigan doesn't see it that way, but a lot of criticism coming her way. I wrote down what you said. The best leadership is servant leadership. Governor Huckabee, preach it. Thank you.
Thank you, Harris. Have a great day.
You too. Meanwhile, the markets have been down amid more dismal jobs numbers today, but we've seen a lot of green this week so far. We should mention that. And that has to do with the program aimed at saving small businesses as well. Some of that is the mix. Can Americans expect any relief in that zone soon? Plus, the growing possibility China may have covered up what went wrong at the start of the outbreak, and more questions about the role of a laboratory in Wuhan province there. One senator who's been sounding the alarm on that for quite a while will join me.
It seems to be highly coincidental that this very contagious virus originated just a few hundred yards or maybe a couple miles from laboratories where the Chinese Communist Party researches coronaviruses.
To open up venues. The fact of the matter is they're going to be scared to do that. So I look at surveys out of Philadelphia, out of the Empire State, New York, that are at or near all-time lows. They've never been so bad. And then I see retail sales sliding more than people thought and feared. And I also see the housing industry potentially contracting, home sales, other related data that shows serious stalling going on here. Where does this all go?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's going to continue to slide until you can get that consumer confidence back up. And testing certainly will help some of it. I think some people who have gotten over the diseases being able to feel hopefully if they get the information that they have the antibodies and that they are immune from it, which we're still waiting to find that out with some definition, that can help more people being part of the economy. But until there is a vaccine or a clear treatment and some sort of comfort of how people can go about their lives without contracting the disease, I think people are going to be, in large part, not everybody, but in large part, very reticent to engage in the same kinds of behaviors. And that is just going to have a continual drag on the economy, unfortunately. I hate being the bearer of bad news, Neil. I like to keep it light and funny, but this is the reality that we're facing.
And I want to tip my hat to you if I wore a hat, because no hat could fit on my head, Carol. But the fact is, you before many were saying, forget the economic numbers. I'm kind of paraphrasing here. Look at the progress or lack thereof on this virus, and that will kind of dictate the course of things. And you've been right. So we'll see what happens now. But Carol, thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Stay safe.
All right, you too, Carol. Roth, on all of that. Kennedy joining us right now, these latest developments. Kennedy, it's one thing to say, all right, we're going to push things back, another couple of weeks. You're seeing similar moves, not across the board, in other parts of the world, in England, where they're going to push it back another couple of weeks. Germany, the exception to that, maybe it'll be back to things almost as usual next week, kids back in school the week after that. But it is a bumpy kind of a road out here. What do you make of it?
It's bumpy and it's very anxiety provoking. It's hard for parents worrying enough about not having an income, not being able to pay the bills and provide for the family, and at the same time having to act as school teachers and caretakers for kids full time. This is a situation that no one saw coming, and that is not a partisan thing. It's not that it was just a failure of members of the administration or some senators. You have the World Health Organization, Chinese propaganda, the New York City Health Commissioner, in addition to members of the president's administration who are really downplaying this. And now what has happened is our plans have kind of been all over the place. So countries that have done best combating the virus and flattening the curve, it's been all about testing. And we're still lagging there. And, we're now really 2 months into this process. And there are so many outstanding questions about testing and the efficacy. What do people do who have had a false negative? When can they return to normal? And what do the antibody tests tell us if and when we can actually get them? And, there's a lot of talk about people who've had the virus and recovered using their plasma in order to heal those who are most vulnerable who have contracted the disease. But there's a 1 month window between contraction and, the terminus of that window. And if you don't have the antibody test for another month, you may not have enough recovered people who've had the virus to provide plasma that could heal people who are just now getting sick. So information is all over the place. I never am surprised when bureaucracies fail to operate in a straight line or transparently, and we really have to rethink our priorities here.
To put it mildly, but you can touch on something about how we react ultimately. And you're a mom, you have two beautiful little girls, and I'm sure you think about what is the safe time, just as a mom, to sort of get back and unwind, no matter what a state governor or a mayor tells you to do. And my last guest was getting into that about whether it's an edict coming from the State House or the White House. People are going to feel a little anxious about going into crowded venues, leaving out stadiums and sports venues, theaters, restaurants. So it will be a slow moving back, won't it?
Yes, absolutely. And, Gavin Newsom, I don't agree with him on very much. He's a governor of California. But he said, it's not going to be a light switch. It's going to be like a dimmer. And as parents, we have to think, what does the future of education, the short term and the longer term, look like? And are we going to have future contraction periods where we're going to have social distancing and quarantining again in the future? And if so, we're going to have flexible employment, but we have to have the employment. We have to have the employment so we can continue to support small businesses. And William Bennett said something I thought was actually great advice for parents, and that is, lead your children with your own comportment, how you want them to react. So if you are calm and if you are in control of the circumstances around you, your kids will follow. It's really hard to do that when you're not quite sure when your next paycheck is going to come in. But, it really is an exercise in meditation for a lot of parents to try and stay calm, employ some of that flexibility, and really try and figure out together as individuals and as families and as communities where we go from here and how we support each other.
That's very well put. That's very well put. Kennedy, thank you very much. Good catching up with you, my friend.
Good to see you.
All right, Kennedy did touch on a couple of key points. You too, Kennedy, about how we comport ourselves through all of this, especially for those who were hoping, if you're in any of these 6 states affected by this pushback on at-home provisions here, and maybe hoping that they could get out and get back with their lives. They can't, and they'll say, so at least not right away. How do people adjust to that?